Hello everybody, my name is Julio Matute and I am presenting on wrongful convictions. Sorry about the screen. For some reason it was not letting me go full screen and also it kept crashing a lot, so this is all I could do at this point. Sorry. What is wrongful convictions? It is when someone is accused of a crime that they did not commit but were still convicted anyways. This happens a lot and there are multiple reasons why an innocent person gets convicted for a crime they did not commit. Wrongful convictions have been a problem for decades, with innocent people having most of their life taken away by serving time in prison for a crime they did not commit. For the next slide, I only chose 7 factors about wrongful convictions and what type of people get convicted in the next slide. Factors that led to wrongful convictions. Number 1 is racism. The second one is coerced confessions. The third one is corruption, misinformation, eyewitness misidentification, forensic mess-ups, and plea bargains. For number 1, racism. Most of the time someone is wrongfully convicted, it is because of their race. When it comes to the statistics that I'm going to show in the next slide, it will show how there is a racial bias in the criminal justice system based on the people who get arrested and why. Number 2, coerced confessions. It basically means that the person that was convicted for committing a crime, they have no choice and are being forced to falsify a confession for the officer, which meant they're basically forcing the person to say that they committed this crime, but in reality they did not commit the crime. Number 3 is corruption. Some officers will abuse their power to collect a huge number of arrests to fulfill quotas that police departments have around the country. Such quotas would include the number of people that they need to have either given tickets or have the number of arrests. Forensic mess-ups. This is when in crime labs evidence will get mishandled or sometimes messed up or confused, and it might end up leading to a person getting wrongfully convicted. Statistics of wrongful convictions and exoneration in the United States. About 5% of the death row or maximum security prison population contains about 5% of innocent people that were wrongfully convicted. Prisoners, before being exonerated, usually lived about 14 years in prison, which meant before they were proven innocent, they were living about 14 years in prison. Well, that's an average. Sometimes it varies depending on if their plea is actually heard by the courts to reopen their case, or if an independent firm wants to open the case again. It all depends on the time and what type of case it is. As of recently, 367 prisoners have been exonerated by DNA testing. What it means is that DNA testing has proven that these prisoners were actually innocent for the crimes they were convicted of. 69% of the exonerated people that were wrongfully convicted was because of eyewitness misidentification. 28% of the exonerated people were wrongfully convicted because of false confessions. One of the cases I chose is the Central Park 5. This is a case from 1989 in which 5 teenagers were wrongfully convicted for the rape and beating of a 28-year-old woman in Central Park. According to the 4 suspects, they were coerced and forced into making a false confession so that the New York City Police Department could calm down the public outcry. They were proven innocent almost 12 years later in 2002, with it being clear that none of them were the actual attackers to the woman because of DNA evidence that linked fluid samples from the victim's clothes to Matias Reyes. After being released, they sued the New York City Police Department and the city for wrongful conviction and emotional duress that they had to suffer when originally interviewed by the police in 1989 and for their time in prison. Case number 2, House versus Bell. In 1985, Paul Gregory House was convicted for the murder of his friend Carol Muncie in Tennessee. He became the prime suspect due to his past criminal record of sexual abuse, and he happened to be on parole at the time, but what made it worse was that he was spotted near the site the cops found Carol's body. The court found him guilty right away because the evidence was considered circumstantial, and his attorney was considered inadequate help and did not really help House prove his innocence. He was sentenced to death row. After being convicted, DNA testing occurred around this time and determined that the fluids found on Carol's clothes matched the DNA of her husband and not of House. So basically, in 1985, he was convicted because of circumstantial evidence, which meant just because he was in the area at the time and his past criminal record, it made him the prime suspect, and when in trial, he had no chance to be proven innocent, and he was wrongfully convicted for the crime. But later on, he was proven innocent by DNA testing from the DNA samples that were on Carol's clothes, which matched her husband. After getting his petition to reopen his case approved, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of House, and he was released in 2006, but returned to prison because of procedure challenges and stayed until his second release in 2008. The Supreme Court based their decision on the improper handling of the evidence at the time. And here are more statistics about wrongful convictions. Apparently since 1989, 2,471 prisoners have been exonerated in the United States. In total years, they lost about 21,725 years of their lives in prison. Well, that's a total number for all the people that got exonerated since 1989. Now when it comes to race, 49% were black, 12% have been Hispanic, 37% have been Caucasian. It does show that there is a racial bias in the system because the group of individuals that have been arrested, well, wrongfully convicted the most, are black people. And then second is Caucasian, and then third is Hispanic. The contributing factors to their wrongful convictions have been false confession, mistaken identity, problems with forensic scientists, perjury, or official misconduct, which is corruption. Now, when it comes to alternatives or a solution, there isn't really that much of a full, large solution that could stop wrongful convictions right away, but there are ways to prevent it from happening. Number one is making sure that the evidence that they find at the crime scene matches up to the police interview. Because even though DNA testing is now a thing that happens every day in crime scenes, back then that wasn't that much of a solution. Number two would be let claims from prisoners saying that they were falsely charged be sent to an independent organization that works with the courts. What I mean by that is, in the case of House versus Bell, House all the time, I think about 3 times, he petitioned his case to the courts about how he was innocent and he wants a second chance. But the courts did not even, well, the warden of the prison did not let him get these claims to the court. He always rejected them, and the warden did not want House to go back and get a second chance because even he got in his mind that he was guilty no matter what. Number 3 is improving the quality of police investigations and representation in court hearings. When it comes to House versus Bell, House did not have proper representation in court, and what I mean by that, according to the reports, his lawyer was not helpful at all, and did not even try to prove his innocence, but rather just fed him to the court, and basically did not even want to help him. Number 4 is already happening with projects with organizations that are trying to help prisoners that have been falsely convicted, such as the Innocence Project, in which they should reopen cases in which there has been new evidence that proves the person's innocence. In the case of House versus Bell, right after he was convicted, the same goes for the Central Park 5, or after they were all convicted, DNA testing has proven that they were not the people that committed the crimes, that it was rather other people that he had no connection to. And that was because of new evidence appearing right after they were convicted. So in this case, if there is new evidence that proves someone is innocent, especially if it's someone that is saying they're innocent while in prison, they should be given a second chance to reopen their case and use the new evidence that they have received to prove their innocence.